أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all our prayers and fasts inshallah during this holy month and give us the tawfiq, the success to be able to continue fasting it and worshipping in it. Yesterday we began with reading the sermon of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he gave one time during the end of the month of Sha'ban in preparation for the upcoming of the month of Ramadan. The narrator of this sermon was Imam Ali alayhi salam. And it shows us that the Prophet, before the coming of an event, he was preparing the people psychologically, mentally to accept the coming of the month. So it's very important for us to understand that before something happens, mental preparation is necessary because this acts as a change in our lifestyles. And usually we don't like changes. We have a problem with changes in our lives. We have certain habits, we have a certain lifestyle that we're living. We get up in the morning, we have our cup of coffee, we have our cigarettes, we have certain shows that we watch, certain things that we do. And when a change comes and disrupts that program that we have, we usually have a negative reaction to that. We don't like that it's coming, even if it was something that was good for us. But this is the human nature. We don't like change. When we're used to something, we have a certain routine in our lives, we like to stick to that. And a lot of people have difficulties with changing their routine. A lot of people find it very challenging. And it causes a lot of disruption and a lot of emotional problems for that individual. A lot of anger might arise. A lot of rejection for things will arise internally for that individual. So preparation, and especially mental preparation, is necessary. And it's important for us to understand that routine is important in life, but it shouldn't be as rigid as we think it should be. Sometimes we do need change in our lives. Sometimes that the routine that we're stuck in is what causes us to lose in our lives. Sometimes we get used to behaving in a certain way. My whole life I think that eating a certain type of breakfast is good. But then I realized that this was not for the best of myself. But why wasn't I able to break out of this? Because I preferred routine lifestyle over the benefit of other things. So the Prophet, before the coming of the month, he prepared the people. The month of Ramadan is a big challenge. It targets some of the most crucial things that we have in our lives. That's food and drinking and intimate relationships. These are things that we're really, really attached to as human beings. We wake up in the morning, and until nighttime, we're busy thinking about what we're going to eat and what we're going to drink and how we're going to spend the day that we're in. The month of Ramadan comes and it says, we're going to press a break over here. We're going to stop this. The stuff that you're attached to and that you're thinking about all the time, we're going to put a break on this. For 1 month out of the year, I'm not going to give you the option, God says. For the rest of the year, if you want to fast voluntarily, that's your choice. But sometimes, God knows that if He leaves it up to us, we're not going to make the best decisions for ourselves. God knows that by fasting and by breaking certain habits, it's beneficial for us. But we might not be realizing that. So we won't voluntarily give up these things. We won't stop eating out of our own will. Some people do, but most people don't. So God says that for 1 month I'm going to force you to stop these things. I'm going to say that you're not allowed to eat and you're not allowed to drink during the day because I want you to start focusing on the inside of yourself. It's enough that throughout the whole of the year, you're busy focusing on the outside. You're always thinking about what you're eating. It's a very big concern, and especially nowadays, if you look at social media, one of the biggest things that people share all the time is things about food. You know, if you think about it biologically and essentially, food is just fuel that we put in our bodies in order to survive. That's the function of food, right? Why do we eat? Why does a cow eat? Why does a cat eat? Why does a bird eat? Why do bacteria eat? The objective of eating is to be able to give ourselves some fuel so we can function throughout the day. That's the objective. But some people turn this and make it the objective of life. Because we enjoy certain flavors and we enjoy certain pleasures when it comes to food, it becomes our main concern in life. So we have a lot of shows online. If you open Netflix, a lot of shows revolve around cooking, revolve around different cuisines. I watch those shows. They're enjoyable. It's not like this is something bad all the time. But the human beings have made food something that a lot of our concern revolves around. We have chefs that earn certain rewards for cooking meals in a certain way. So food changed from something, if you look at history, you know, you had the hunters, right? They would go and hunt for food. They would catch an animal with a spear, with an arrow, or a fish from the water. And they would, you know, when they invented the fire, they would roast that thing and they would eat it. They would gather around with each other. Sometimes food was made as a gathering for the community. It used to bring people together. Slowly, as we evolved, we began treating food in a much more sophisticated and complicated manner. So nowadays, detaching ourselves from these things is even more important than it was before. Because we have this food culture that's really destroying us. If you go to certain cities, and unfortunately in Shahr Ramadan it becomes worse. In a lot of communities, a lot of countries also overseas, the month of Ramadan is when you indulge even more in food. If you look at Dearborn, for example, I just came there a few days ago. Food is the biggest event that you have during this month. At night, the cars are the busiest. It's like, you know, like the day and night flip over there during Ramadan. The restaurants are open, people start eating more and more. One of my friends went to the butcher shop, and there was no parking. And they were wondering, like, people were eating before Ramadan. What happened now that there's no parking in these shops? You can't buy food. The lines are very, very long. Well, people end up indulging and eating even more and more. So I don't want to condemn this completely. I'm just saying that we have to understand that when we detach ourselves from something, we don't want to end up doing something that is counterproductive. So when Ramadan is supposed to be a time for us to move away from our pleasures and desires, we have to be careful not to indulge in those even more. Because sometimes this is a reaction of the self. When you know that you're not allowed to do something, you end up doing it even more. This is a human type of behavior. When someone says you can't do this, for some reason, we start wanting to do it even more. Whether it's to do with food or anything else. This type of rebellion that we have inside. Or we feel like we're going to lose something, so we end up doing it more. And this maybe is related to that kind of emotion too. Once we know that we can't have something, we end up excessively intaking that thing. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So we have to think about this month and think about the objectives of ordaining fasting. We have to understand what fasting is and the abstention from certain things that God and the Prophet told us to stay away from, and then understand that and try to see whether we're fulfilling this objective. Because the Prophet and the Imams in multiple narrations say that some people in Ramadan, all they get from fasting is hunger and thirst, nothing else. So just because I'm not eating and drinking doesn't mean that I'm necessarily achieving a spiritual goal or that I'm necessarily changing myself in my life. No. Fasting is something that prepares me for change. It's a tool. It aids me to change. Sort of like if you give someone a hammer and they don't know what to do with this hammer. You give them a hammer, a screwdriver, you give them like a bunch of tools, and if they don't know how to use these tools are going to sit in the garage and you get nothing out of it. Or you can try doing something with those tools, but you don't really get anything beneficial from it. So fasting in itself is a tool, it's a means to achieving something else. So when we fast, we have to fast consciously. We have to understand why we are fasting. A lot of people, when they start fasting, their morals become worse. Level of anger spikes up. Hatred towards other people. Behavioral problems start developing. Well, that shows that there's something wrong happening. Fasting is not supposed to lead to this. It's supposed to lead to bettering yourself. So maybe we have an internal rebellion. We don't like what's going on. We don't like the fact that we can't eat and we can't drink. But we're doing it because we don't want to burn in hellfire. So reassessing this is very important. And inshallah, I'm hoping that in the next few nights, we can go over these things. We can talk about the objective of fasting, why we fast, and what I'm planning on doing is, inshallah, first of all, introducing three concepts that we have, our scholars spoke about. The Sharia, the Tariqah, and the Haqiqah. These three notions, the Sharia is the legislative aspect of Islam, the rules, the laws. You have to pray, you have to fast, you can't do this haram, you can't do that. That's the Sharia aspect of religion. It's the outer aspect. But there are other two aspects which are even more important. And that is every rule that Islam or religion has given us, there's an inner meaning for it. So we have the fasting law, which means that, if in order to fast, you can't eat, you can't drink from sunrise to sunset. That's the law. Then there's an inner meaning. What does it mean not to eat? What does it mean not to fast, not to drink? What is the inner meaning behind this? How do I achieve the inner goal behind these worships? So first I'll introduce the difference between these three concepts, and then we will go through the rulings of fasting one by one, beginning with intention. Our intention is very important when we perform our worships. We have to have an intention. The Sharia aspect, you make the intention of fasting before the month of Ramadan or the night before the day. You have to do that. The inner aspect of intention. What does intention mean? What is it psychologically to us? What is it internally? Why do I have to have an intention when I do certain actions? Is the intention more important or the action more important? So these debates we'll be discussing, inshallah. After that, we'll talk about the other aspects of fasting. And hopefully, we can take these ideas and try to apply them in our lives in order to better our lives and to benefit from fasting as much as we can. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq to continue fasting and to be able to realize the benefit of this month and to be given mercy and forgiveness. Inshallah, bihaqqi Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.